Sri Gauranga. Thank you all so much again for joining us this evening. We'll have some kirtan and then we'll start the discussion of chapter 17 of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Krishnamine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Krishnamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurapani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vastatya Vishatarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurapani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vastatya Vishatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gora Hari Bol Nitya Gora Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gora Hari Bol Jai Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada Shri Shantai Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Shantai Gaur Hari Bol. So, Hare Krishna again to everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We'll chant our prayers before we begin. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunnitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapnantikam Ma Om Vishnapadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Nam Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charine Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paschatya Yeshtarini. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We are continuing with our discussion on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is a wonderful book that was written by Srila Prabhupada based on the biography of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this biography was written by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So I pray for all your blessings with just this class today, so we can gain a better idea of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, his mission, his teachings, great mercy on all of us, so that we can improve our services, develop our love for him. So this is a very significant chapter in that regard, because this is about Lord Chaitanya, specifically about Lord Chaitanya's appearance, his incarnation, and his mission in this world. And it is called it's called Lord Chaitanya, the original personality of Godhead. So this is chapter 7. So today is a very today is the start of Ramayan weeks, auspicious period where we increase our consciousness of the Supreme Lord in his incarnation of Lord Ram. And it's very nice that we're going to be discussing a little bit of the Lord's incarnations and expansions and his energies as well. And Lord Ramachandra appears with his incarnation and his expansions. He appears with Lord Lakshman, his expansion, with Lord Bharat and Lord Shatrughan. He also appears with his energy, Srimati Sita Devi, and his pure devotee, Hanumanji. So the Lord is always with his principal associates so that he can carry out his wonderful pastimes and his mission. And in the same way, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared with his expansions, his incarnations, his energies. And this all forms part of our discussion today. So we'll chant the invocation prayer. This is verse 18 of the first chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. The translation is: Glory to Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Sri Gaura or Chaitanya. So we'll start with Srila Prabhupada's words. We make a great mistake if we think Lord Chaitanya is a conditioned soul. He is to be understood as the supreme, absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna himself. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is therefore said of Lord Chaitanya, Krishna is now present in his 5 diverse manifestations. Unless one is situated in uncontaminated goodness, it is very difficult to understand Lord Chaitanya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, in order to understand Lord Chaitanya, one has to follow the direct disciples of Lord Chaitanya, the 6 Goswamis, and especially the path chalked out by Srila Jiva Goswami. So the state of uncontaminated goodness, this is actually pure goodness. This is transcendental consciousness. And this is not something that is very easy for us to attain to. Certainly not in the beginning are we on that level. Even material goodness is not enough for us to understand Lord Chaitanya's glories. This transcendental state, which is called here uncontaminated goodness, this is only attained after much devotional practice. So in the beginning, we depend on the instructions of great acharyas, like 6 Goswamis, and those who carry the teachings of the acharyas, our spiritual masters, our authorities, in order to help us understand the position of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we understand that Lord Chaitanya is God from so many evidences that we will discuss this evening. And it's very important that we have this understanding clear so that we avoid the offense of thinking of him as an ordinary conditioned soul. So one of the evidences is of the Lord's mission. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has a very unique mission, but in general, all the incarnations of God, and God himself, of course, when he appears in this world in his original form, they have a mission, something that they're coming to do. So this mission in broad terms is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 8, very famous verse, where the Lord says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkitam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. And the translation basically says that the Lord comes to deliver the pious, to annihilate the miscreants, those evildoers, those that are acting against the Lord and his devotees, and he establishes the religious principles, that which we follow in order to attain self-realization and get delivered from this material world in each age. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually performing all three of these functions, but this is not primarily why he appeared. How is he performing these functions? He destroys the demoniac qualities of people, even if he's not killing demons as Krishna did. He certainly delivers the pious. And he does all of this while establishing the Yuga Dharma for the stage. But why do we say that that's not his primary reason for appearing? Well, Krishna himself actually doesn't need to do these things. His incarnations actually perform these tasks for him through Lord Vishnu. So how do we understand this? So Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, and he expands into Lord Balaram. That's his first expansion. We explained a few chapters back that Lord Balaram then expands into all the various four-armed forms of Krishna, who are broadly referred to as Narayan. All the Narayan forms in Vaikuntha all then progressively expanded in this way. So from the second fourfold expansion, the first fourfold expansion that Lord Balaram expands into is Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So from Sankarshan, when the fourfold expansion expands the second time, I hope this is not sounding too complicated, but basically Lord Balaram appears in that fourfold incarnation, that fourfold expansion as Lord Sankarshan, and then from there he expands into Vishnu. So basically the difference between expansions and incarnations, so that expansions generally are the Lord's different forms in the spiritual world, and the incarnations are called avatar. We heard this term before. It means one who descends. So the incarnations come to the material world. So what's the difference between Lord Vishnu and the other four-armed forms, the Narayan forms in the spiritual world? So His Holiness Ram Govinda Swami Maharaj explained that basically the Narayan forms are the expansions of the Lord in the spiritual world. They maintain, Lord Narayan maintains the spiritual world, whereas Lord Vishnu descends. He's an incarnation, and he therefore maintains the material world for Vishnu. So Bhagavatam explains that we use the words or the name Lord Vishnu, but basically there are three Vishnus who are for one person, but they're acting in three different roles. So Lord Vishnu basically refers to all of them because they're actually one person, but we also refer to them in their three roles as Mahavishnu, who breathes out all the universes, or alternately it's also described that the universes come out from the pores of the skin. And then there's Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, who enters into all the universes that Mahavishnu has created, and he creates all the elements within it through the secondary creator Brahma. And then the third aspect is Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, who enters into all the the atoms of everything that exists in each universe into the hearts of all living beings. He pervades everything, actually, and he also is the source of all the incarnations as well. So in this way, Lord Vishnu is able to carry out these three functions that Krishna describes for Krishna. So he destroys the miscreants, he delivers the pious, and he establishes the religious principles as well. So Lord Vishnu, and as we said, specifically Sri Radhakshay Vishnu, but as all Lord Vishnus are the same, we will be referring to him as Lord Vishnu in our class today. So Lord Vishnu is there to kill the demons, basically, for Krishna. So we'll come to a very nice description in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of why this is so. But also the Lord's material energy can also destroy the demons. So this happens in various ways. Material energy has many tools at her disposal: illness, natural disasters, accidents, and so on. But occasionally demons are very powerful. And this is because they perform much penance to the demigods, and then they get benedictions, which basically are always aimed at extending their lives. They can never attain immortality, but they try to get it in a way by asking to die under very difficult circumstances. So this means that material nature cannot produce such circumstances, and so the demons, they cause some trouble for a while, and then Lord Vishnu himself has to descend and save the day through incarnating in very wondrous forms. So, for an example, we know that Hiranyakashipu could not get immortality, but he asked for many benedictions that were almost equal to immortality. He asked, of course, that he wouldn't be killed in the land, air, sea, not by any weapon, not by any man, demigod, animal, and so on. So we can see that for material nature, it's pretty high standard. So Lord Vishnu himself manifested that beautiful form of Lord Nrsimhadev, who was able to fulfill all the criteria of these benedictions and therefore kill Hiranyakashipu. So either through the Lord, through Lord Vishnu, through the agency of material nature, Lord Krishna is able to destroy the demons. We can have the example of a king. The king in the olden days used to dispense capital punishment. He didn't have to go and do the dirty work himself, you can put it that way. He didn't have to be the executioner. Krishna doesn't want to spend his time killing demons. He's got better things to do. So he, as God, the Supreme Lord, he can always expand himself, incarnate himself as necessary, and he has his energies, like the material energies, to do what he would rather not be doing, you could say, while he engages in things that he would rather be doing. So the explanation in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila 4:8 says, Swayam Bhagavan Mera Karmana He. Swayam Bhagav. Sorry, trying to get the tune right. Swayam Bhagavanera Karmana He Bhara Harana Sthiti Karta Vishnu Karena Jagat Palana. And the translation of this verse is, to take away this burden, however, is not the work of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The maintainer, Lord Vishnu, is the one who protects the universe. So we'll clarify some terms from this verse. When we say it's not the work of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we also understand that the term Supreme Personality of Godhead refers to Vishnu. But here, Supreme Personality of Godhead specifically refers to Krishna. And that's because in the verse, the word Swayam Bhagavan are used. So Swayam Bhagavan specifically refers to Krishna, because Swayam Bhagavan means the summum bonum, the origin and the source of all Bhagavans, as Srimad Bhagavatam explains. The famous verse, Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text 28 says that Krishna is Stu Bhagavan Swayam. So the same chapter is explaining about all the various expansions and incarnations of Krishna, but it does not use the term Swayam Bhagavan for anyone else besides Krishna. So this verse as well is speaking about the fact that this burden of the sinful, it's not the work of Krishna to destroy them. Lord Vishnu, the maintainer, he protects the universe from such people. And even when Krishna does kill the demons, since all his incarnations and expansions are within him, Lord Vishnu actually does the killing. It's very interesting. It's explained also in the same chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, what does Krishna like to do? What does he want to do? What does he come then to do specifically in this incarnation of Lord Chaitanya? So, when he comes, he wants to simultaneously teach us how to be the perfect devotees, all the way to the example of how to be the perfect devotees in the mellows of conjugal love, which none of his other forms experience, none of his incarnations or expansions do. And he also comes to experience the love of Sri Radha. And that's also something that only he can do. So, although he carries out the other functions, as Krishna explained in that verse from Bhagavad Gita, he does kill the demoniac mentalities, he does deliver the pious, he does deliver the Yoga Dharma for the age, the chanting of Hare Krishna, but he also fulfills his two missions that only he can. And so the explanation of these missions is in Chaitanya Charitamrita in many places, but the verses we've selected, Adi Leela, chapter 4, text 15 and 16. Prema rasa niryasa karite ashvadhana Ragamarga Bhakiloke Karite Pracharana Rasika Shekhara Krishna Parama Karuna Edui Hetu Haite Vichara Uddama. And the translations are: the Lord's desire to appear was born from two reasons. The Lord wanted to taste the sweet essence of the mellows of love of God, and he wanted to propagate devotional service in the world on the platform of spontaneous attraction. So this goes much further than Prema by itself. Spontaneous attraction, we discussed already, is the attraction that the residents of Vrindavan had. So we're going to go into this with a lot more detail later on. But this is specifically what the Lord came to teach. This is why he himself, Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan, appeared as Lord Chaitanya to give us these teachings. Thus he is known as supremely jubilant and as the most merciful of all. So, like we had said last week, the issue is that because the Lord's appearance is so well hidden, people may make that mistake of thinking of him as an ordinary conditioned soul like the rest of us. And this is a grave mistake that we should try to avoid in ourselves and others by becoming educated about Lord Chaitanya's wonderful qualities, features, his activities, everything that makes him the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so we need to hear. That's how we develop faith. Srimad Bhagavatam clearly explains that by hearing, we develop our faith. And so we have wonderful literatures that have been composed by our Goswamis, Srila Prabhupada highlights, in order to give us more understanding about the life, the teachings, the pastimes, the features of Lord Chaitanya's Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is highlighted in all of their writings. So the Goswamis in particular are uniquely qualified to write about the Lord, Lord Chaitanya. And by Goswamis, we also mean the writer of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami's eternal identity in Krishna Lila is that of Kasturi Manjari, or some say Ratnareka Manjari. So basically, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami is one of the Manjaris, as are the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. And we know that the Manjaris, they have very deep, very, very close service to Radha and Krishna, more so than even the principal gopis. And so they are the ones who know how to serve Krishna and Radha in the highest mellow of conjugal love the best. So their writings are what we are privileged to have access to. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, as we said, wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And what is very interesting about his writing is that by the time he had the service granted to him, he was very old. It was described as very infirm. He explains in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that his eyesight is failing, his hands are shaking, and he wasn't sure how he was going to carry out this most glorious but very painstaking task. So he prayed to Lord Madan Mohan, and the Lord helped him, gave him a sign and helped him actually to write this biography. So indeed, the writings of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, they are as authorized scripture as any of the Vedic scriptures, since they do come from the Lord himself, inspiring and guiding Chaitanya, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami directly. And as we said, the Goswamis are also Manjaris, and all their writings were also received directly from Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directed Rupa Goswami personally, Sanatana Goswami personally. We have all the exchanges of their teachings, and they he also instructed Raghunath Das Goswami and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. And then Jiva Goswami and Gopal Bhatta Goswami, they were of course trained by the senior Goswamis, and Jiva Goswami in particular, being the direct disciple of Rupa Goswami, he was able to write very extensively from all the teachings of his predecessors, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. This is the priceless works that we have that are basically all emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Chaitanya. The most astonishing fact is that Lord Chaitanya, although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, never displayed himself as Krishna. Rather, whenever intelligent devotees detected that he was Lord Krishna and addressed him as Lord Krishna, he denied it. Indeed, he sometimes placed his hands over his ears, protesting that a human being should not be addressed as the Supreme Lord. Indirectly, he was teaching the Mayavadi philosophers that one should never falsely pose himself as the Supreme Lord and thereby misguide his followers. Nor should the followers be foolish enough to accept anyone and everyone as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should test by consulting scriptures and by seeing the activities of the person in question. One should not, however, mistake Lord Chaitanya and his 5 diverse manifestations for ordinary human beings. Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. The beauty of Lord Chaitanya is that although he is the Supreme Lord, he came as a great devotee to teach all conditioned souls how devotional service should be rendered. Conditioned souls who are interested in devotional service should follow in the exemplary footsteps of Lord Chaitanya to learn how Krishna can be attained by devotional service. Thus, the Supreme Lord himself teaches the conditioned soul how he should be approached by devotional service. So, as we read, although Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was vehemently against being referred to as the Supreme Lord, it was very clear that he was no ordinary person. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead moving amongst us definitely stands out by his extraordinary beautiful features, as well as his natural effulgence, his extraordinary behavior, he's just beyond us completely. So it wasn't difficult for those intelligent persons, as Sri Prabhupada calls it, to make out that this is no ordinary personality, as well as the fact that those who are very well versed in scripture also know that he is he's certainly expressing the features of the personality of Godhead, and he is coming with the mission of the personality of Godhead. We remember that whenever an incarnation or whenever the Lord appears himself, whenever he descends, he always has a mission. So fulfilling that mission as well was very clear for everyone who was intelligent at the time to see that this was certainly the Supreme Personality of Godhead appearing in a very special form. Even the great Mayavadi sannyasi Prakashananda Saraswati was able to detect that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Narayan. So, as much as the Lord satisfied all the criteria, he still did not want to be referred to as God, because he was appearing as a devotee, as an ordinary person. And that would have set a very dangerous precedent for those who are ordinary and would like to be God or would like to be called God, for they would certainly have taken such opportunities as in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes as evidence that they could do the same. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always denying that an ordinary conditioned soul, of what she was playing the role, he was always denying that an ordinary conditioned soul can ever be referred to as God. So this makes it very clear, or it should make it very clear. But at the same time, we remember that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, besides displaying features of the personality of Godhead in his person, he also showed us other forms of himself. He displayed himself as Radha and Krishna. He displayed the universal form, the forms of Lord Ram, Lord Varaha, Lord Nrsimhadev. At different occasions, he displayed the forms of all his incarnations, or many of his incarnations and expansions. So now this could make us a bit confused. On one hand, Lord Chaitanya is denying that he is the Supreme Lord, but on the other hand, he's showing himself to be the Supreme Lord. So the Lord, of course, is supremely intelligent. And what we understand from his activities in this regard is that even though he did clearly state that he was not God, we still have people. I actually came across one example a few days ago. We still have people who insist that ordinary human beings who seem to display some kind of ecstasies are incarnations of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and are therefore God. So this is still happening. Now, even if we made the arguments about the fact that this person is certainly not of the extraordinary beauty and appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we do have the problem that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And even if we say that this person in no way was displaying the extraordinary ecstasies of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and other legitimate works, we still have people judging ecstasies on their own terms. And even if we say that this so-called incarnation is not described in the scriptures, they also misinterpret the scriptures. But what we do have is the fact that this person, as all other impersonators also, never did show themselves to be any of Krishna's forms, didn't even show themselves to be Krishna himself. There's no record ever that this person or any other impersonators show themselves to be Ram, Krishna, or Simha, or the universal form, and so on. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in very mercifully displaying so many wonderful forms of his, was able to help us to refute the claims of such impostors and also to solidify our faith in him, knowing that he indeed is the Supreme Personality of Godhead from all his wonderful features and pastimes. By analytically studying the 5 diverse manifestations of the Supreme Lord, we can come to know that Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Absolute Truth and that Lord Nityananda is his immediate expansion. We can also come to understand that Advaita Prabhu is also in the category of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but is subordinate to Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu. So we have already explained that Krishna and of course Sri Krishna Chaitanya, they're Swayam Bhagavan. The Samabonam, the original personality of Godhead, and all the other forms that expand are coming from Krishna. So the first expansion is Lord Balaram, who is Lord Nityananda. So Lord Balaram, being Krishna's first expansion, his primary expansion, is practically identical to Krishna. The difference in the form being the color, that Krishna is described to be the color of a monsoon cloud, and Lord Balaram is described to be the color of an autumn cloud, white cloud. And the difference is also there in their mood, because Lord Balaram, he sees himself as a servitor of Krishna, so much so that he actually expands into everything that Krishna needs, utilizes practically the whole spiritual world, and also in the material world, whatever paraphernalia that Krishna uses or that is used in Krishna service. So as the expansions then flow from Lord Balaram, the first fourfold expansion, the second fourfold expansion, and all the innumerable expansions, they're all differing somewhat in their mood, in their appearance, and so on. So the differences, of course, are becoming greater, the differences between them and Krishna in terms of that mood and appearance, but they still have all the qualities of Krishna. And that's what makes them Vishnu Tattva. We explained last week that Vishnu Tattva has qualities that make them that make it possible for them to be in that category of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So all those qualities are there, but they are different from Krishna in certain ways. At the same time, they are Krishna. He's carrying out the functions that are needed from him, or that Swayam Bhagavan, that Bhagavan has to carry out. Like we explained, the maintenance of the spiritual world, the maintenance of the material world. So this is Krishna's inconceivable oneness and difference, how he can at the same time be all of these forms and expansions of his, but at the same time be himself, unchanged, no matter how many innumerable expansions and incarnations originate from. So therefore we see that as a Balaram considers himself subordinate to Krishna and a servitor of Krishna, so by the time we come to Mahavishnu, he's also, of course, considering himself subordinate to Lord Balaram and Lord Krishna. And we find that the changes are also quite great in terms of his form. He's, of course, got 4 arms. He doesn't dress like a cowherd boy. He doesn't play the flute. He doesn't. Um, he's got all the universes emanating from him. He's lying down on Lord Anantashesh in his Yoga Nidra Stamba. So, and of course, his activities, he's engaged in the maintenance of the material world. So this is different from Krishna in a way, but we understand that he is still Krishna from this wonderful analogy that Srila Prabhupada gives us. So we have one person who needs to go to work. So they take the dress of their occupation, they take the mood of their occupation, which is probably that they're quite serious at work, and they take a whole different persona sometimes when they're in their work environment. But then when they come home, they're very relaxed around their family members, they go out with their friends, they're very jovial. But even though the person may be so drastically different in all these scenarios, it's all the same person. So it's the same way that Krishna is in all these different situations, whether he's at work as Lord Narayan in the spiritual world, or as Lord Vishnu in the material world, whether he is with his parents, whether he's with the gopis, he's got different moods, and that actually can even translate into totally different forms, like we said, Narayan, Vishnu, and so on. But he's still the same Krishna, carrying all of this out in the most extraordinary manner. But we remember that there's always still the original Krishna who remains unchanged amidst all of this, and he is Swayam Bhagavan. He is our Vrindavan Krishna, and his primary love and what he likes to do is have pastimes with the residents of Vrindavan. Now, this Mahavishnu, who we have described, this wonderful incarnation of the Lord in this world, who's maintaining the material world, this Mahavishnu is Advaitacharya. So as we said, he considers that he is subordinate to Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya, or Krishna and Balaram. And so even though he is very senior in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he serves them. So it's also said that a personality named Sadashiva appears in Advaitacharya. So let's clarify this point, because this wonderful personality Sadashiva is not the same as Lord Shiva, the Guna avatar, who is worshipped in the Vedic scriptures amongst Hinduism. Because Sadashiva is actually an expansion of Lord Sankarshan, which makes him in the category of Vishnu Tattva. And he is specifically within then the Vaikuntha realm, whereas Lord Shiva is a transformation of Vishnu Tattva for the purposes that need to be carried out in the material world. So why does the Lord need to transform? Well, basically, in order for the Lord to deal with the material nature and the mode of ignorance of destructive functions, this is actually opposite to the nature of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada describes that Maya is the back of the Lord. Where the Lord exists, Maya cannot be. It's like light and dark. If we have light, we simply cannot have the presence of darkness. So when Krishna needs to manifest the material world, manifest the mode of ignorance, which is the basis for the material, basically, because it is the living entity's ignorance of their understanding, the understanding of their constitutional position that brings them to the material world. how is the Lord administering the mode of ignorance or the material nature? So he transforms into a feature who is able to manage these aspects, the material nature, the mode of ignorance, more so than an ordinary living entity can do. But not so much that this personality becomes Vishnu Tattva, because then simply he cannot be in the presence of the material nature or ignorance. It's not possible. So therefore we understand that Lord Shiva can't be Vishnu Tattva, otherwise there'd be no point in him existing. He's supposed to be able to be in touch with material nature and in touch with ignorance, which is something that Krishna himself does not do. So Lord Shiva being transformed for this purpose, there's a very nice analogy that explains it. Srila Prabhupada says it's like milk and yogurt. So milk is the original substance. Yogurt is transformation of milk for the purpose that yogurt is needed for. And yogurt can't go back to being milk. So in the same way, Lord Shiva is created by the Lord, having his characteristics for what he is meant to do, the same way that we have our characteristics. And as we explained last week, we are just not possessive of the characteristics of Vishnu Tattva, so we can never become it, can't earn those characteristics or get those characteristics at any time. And it's the same with Lord Shiva. So even though we all come from the Lord, we can't go back and become him. We carry out our functions as his servants and then go back to him in the spiritual world. So the Sadashiva, therefore, who is appearing in Advaita Charya, as per some sources, some say it's both Sadashiva and Mahavishnu, some say it's Mahavishnu alone, but this personality is actually Vishnu Tattva and not the Lord Shiva of this world, who is in his own Tattva, called Shiva Tattva, since he is not exactly a Jiva and not the Supreme Personality of Godhead either. Okay, so we'll continue reading. The Supreme Personality of Godhead and his immediate and subordinate expansion are worshipable by the other two. So that immediate and subordinate expansion, the immediate expansion we said is Lord Balaram, who is Lord Nityananda, first expansion, and the subordinate expansion is Mahavishnu. So that means the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna, who is Lord Chaitanya, his immediate and subordinate expansions are worshipable by the other two. And who are the other two? The representation of the internal potency and the representation of the marginal potency. So last week we said that the internal potency of power of the Supreme Lord is one of the divisions of his powers, and the representation of this superior potency is Gadadhar Pandit, and Srila Prabhupada says he represents the confidential devotee, and the representation of the marginal potency is Shivas, who represents the pure devotee. And both of these are worshippers of the other three. So we explained last week that the energies are different from the possessor of the energy. If I possess the power to lift something, that power can't exist outside of me. It has to serve me. That's what its function is. But yet when that power is working, it seems that I'm working at the same time, that the two of us are one. But really, the energy is always dependent on the source, and the energy is always doing what the source needs, and that's how the energy is fulfilled. Otherwise, it has no function on its own. The same way, if my power of lifting left me, I'm not sure what it would do. So, because of that, when the energies are separated, and that's what the marginal energy, the jivas, are capable of doing when they're separated from the Lord, they can't actually function on their own. And the function of their existence is to act in service of the Lord. So as we explained, these the divisions of the energies of the Lord are the superior, the marginal, and the inferior energy. And further, the superior energy represented by Gadadhar Pandit is referred to as a confidential devotee. So what this means is that Gadadhar Pandit is a devotee in the conjugal rasa. And this is juxtaposed to Shivas Pandit, who is a jiva like us, who has attained to pure devotional service, but is referred to as a pure devotee and not a confidential devotee, because Shivas Pandit is not in the category of or in the rasa of conjugal love. So we'll explain a bit more about those two visions, but further on. But all four of the Lord's expansions, whether in the worshipable category, that is Nityananda and Advaita, or the worshipper category, Gadadhar and Shivas, are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's not just when we're getting it all right that we have the worshipper and the worshipable. Now, Sri Prabhupada says that even the worshipable, that is Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda, they're also serving Lord Chaitanya, just as much as the energies, the worshippers of Gadadhar Pandit and Srivas Thakur are doing. So we can understand this by just looking at what we know of the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, in the worshipper category, we have the Lord, the internal energies, Sri Radha, the gopis, Lakshmi, all of the innumerable goddesses of fortune, and they're all serving Krishna. Now we know that the gopis certainly are fully engaged, but also the goddesses of fortune headed by Lakshmi Devi are always serving the Lord. They're always massaging the lotus feet of the Lord, but it's also described that they're even cleaning Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is spotlessly clean, but the goddess of fortune cleans Vaikuntha because devotional service pleases the Lord. And what to speak of all of the jivas, the marginal energies of the Lord that are existing in the spiritual world after being purified fully by devotional service, or because they are nitya siddhas, eternally purified. These personalities are always fully engaged in the service of the Lord. But we've also described that the other expansions of the Lord in the spiritual world, the other Narayan forms, they're also carrying out their functions and duties for Krishna, and they also consider themselves subordinate. So basically, the whole spiritual world is based on devotional service. Every personality, both the worshipper category and the worshipable category, are all engaged in service to Krishna. So the fundamental truths that underlie the spiritual world is that devotional service is the basis for everything, and that even amongst all the Bhagavans, all the supreme persons, there is a supreme personality of Godhead. And of course, it means that no one else can ever become one or take the place of that supreme personality of Godhead. So we also understand that Lord Nityananda then, though being the elder brother of Lord Chaitanya, is subordinate to him, serving Lord Chaitanya. So this is a bit different from what we would expect. We'd expect that the elder brother would be the one in the position of worship, but there's a very special pastime behind this. We remember during Lord Ram's pastimes that Lord Ramachandra was subjected to being exiled by his stepmother. And this greatly aggrieved Lord Lakshman, who had a bit more fiery temperament. But he could not say anything against Lord Ram's decision to go to the forest, and he was very pained to see the apparent hardships what he felt that Lord Ram was going through. So when the two divine personalities in their original forms, Krishna and Balaram, were coming to the material world in Dwapara Yuga, Lord Balaram requested to be the elder brother. And it was not so that he could take the place of Lord Ram and be worshipped first and loved the most and have a position of authority. It was because he wanted to serve Krishna, to make sure that he wouldn't be taken advantage of in any way, to make sure that he would always be protected. So the Balaram has taken the position of the elder brother to be the biggest servant of Krishna. And this is the most extraordinary thing. But this is, of course, again, typical of the spiritual world, where all the relationships are just so extraordinary now. There is a specific difference between the pure devotee and the confidential devotee. So this is now when we're coming more to describe this differences. The different potencies of the Lord are engaged in serving the Supreme Lord in different transcendental relationships. They are situated in conjugal love, in parental affection, in friendship, or in servitude. By judging impartially, one can find that the internal potencies of the Supreme Lord who are engaged in conjugal love with the Lord are the best of all devotees. Thus, both internal devotees and confidential devotees are attracted by the conjugal love of the Supreme Absolute Truth. These are the most confidential devotees of Lord Chaitanya. So there's a difference then, we know, between the energies of the Lord, that Gadadhar Pandit is representing the superior energy, and that Srivas Thakur is representing the marginal energy. But also Gadadhar Pandit is a confidential devotee within the rasa of conjugal love. Now this does not mean that those who are marginal energies, Shiva Tattva, cannot enter into the rasas of conjugal love. We have the examples of the sages of Dandakaranya, for example, who during Ram Lila very much wanted to experience this rasa, and so they performed much austerity and qualified to become gopis in their next lives, which were within the Dwarka. In the Dwarka Yuga, where they became gopis. We also know the personified Vedas became gopis as well. So definitely the marginal energy as well as the superior energy can be in the category of confidential devotees who are in the rasa of conjugal love with Krishna, although there is always a difference between superior energy and the marginal energy. And there can also be devotees who are in the other rasas as well. These devotees who are called pure devotees. But Srila Prabhupada says that the confidential devotees are the best called devotees. Other pure devotees who are more or less attached to Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu are attracted by other transcendental relationships such as parental affection, friendship, and servitorship. When such devotees are very much attached to the activities of Lord Chaitanya, they at once become confidential devotees in conjugal love with the Supreme Lord. So this, of course, explains to us that those who are in the other wonderful relationships that we can have with Krishna, the servitorship and the Vatsalya Ras, which is parental love, Sakya Ras, which is friendly love for Krishna. They also have shelter under Lord Nityananda and Advaitacharya. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has been so merciful to appear with all these associates who are engaged in these rasas in the spiritual world, so that these rasas can be attainable for us in the material world. Not that, of course, we have it in the material world, but that us who are still in the material world can engage in devotional service to realize our relationships with the Lord and attain it in the spiritual world. And this is a unique contribution of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, because up to the time of the Lord's appearance, there had only really been Santaras and Dasyaras that were explained and that were attainable in the other sampradayas and the other traditions. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us all the opportunity to learn and to aspire for achieving relationships with Krishna in Sri Vrindavan Dham under the shelter of his associates as well as himself in the highest of all rasas, that is the rasa of conjugal love. There's a very nice song sung by Sri Narottam Das Thakur, a great devotee and acharya in the disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya. Narottam Das sings, when will there be transcendental eruptions all over my body simply by my hearing the name of Gauranga? When will tears incessantly flow from my eyes, simply by my uttering the names of the Lord? When will Lord Nityananda have mercy upon me and make all my desires for material enjoyment insignificant? When shall I be purified by giving up all contamination of material enjoyment? So Lord Nityananda's position is quite unique, because as he is the first expansion, he is also the first devotee of the Lord. And he is the one that takes the role of the first guru in that way, because as a devotee, he guides all of us to follow his perfect example and become pure devotees of Krishna. So his external representation is the spiritual master. And by following them, getting the mercy of Lord Nityananda, we're able to progress from Shraddha all the way through the stages of devotional service. And then we come to Asakti, where we lose all material attachments. This is through the mercy of the spiritual master. So this is why Narottam Das Thakur is praying that through Lord Nityananda's mercy, we can actually give up our material enjoyments and our material desires. And the stage of Asakti is very important, because when we give up all these material things, we get our attachment to Krishna at the same time. And when we get our attachment to Krishna, we realize our relationship with him. And if that relationship is in Vrindavan Dham, we can see Vrindavan with transcendental eyes to develop our relationship with the Lord. So he prays, and when shall I be able to see the transcendental abode Vrindavan? When shall I be eager to accept the 6 Goswamis as my prime guides? And when will I be able to understand the conjugal love of Krishna? So Lord Nityananda guides us still further after Sakti in these rasas of we said neutrality of Dasya Ras, of Vatsalya Ras, of Sakya Ras. And Narottam Das Thakur praying for the understanding of conjugal love from the six Goswamis is because that is his rasa. So in particular, he prays to them. No one should be eager. Sorry. And when shall I be able to understand the conjugal love of Krishna? No one should be eager to understand the conjugal love of Krishna without undergoing disciplinary training under the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. So this is very important for us to understand that no one can actually jump to this very elevated stage. One has to go through the stages of devotional service from Shraddha all the way to letting go of all material attachments completely. And it's only possible at that very advanced stage that we can ever hope to realize our relationship with Krishna and develop it, if possible, all the way to conjugal love. It's not something that we could ever skip to, but thanks to the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all his associates, all the acharyas, our beloved Srila Prabhupada, this process is has become available to us, and becoming more and more available to all living entities throughout the world, so that everybody can get this opportunity. And the importance is that we sincerely follow it stage by stage till we can get to the elevated position of having direct relationships with Krishna. So thank you all so much for your kind attention. Are there any questions or comments? Today's discussion was a bit longer than usual.
Hi, Krishmaji, thank you for the wonderful class. Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Mansi, I wanted to ask you, what is the importance of wearing tulsi beads, and also the importance of chanting on tulsi beads? And can anybody wear tulsi beads, or just certain people? Thank you, Mansi.
So you're welcome. So tulsi beads are there are many references in scripture. I couldn't post that up on our group, but basically, tulsi beads sanctify our body. Tulsi is so very dear to Krishna. When we wear tulsi beads, it also identifies ourselves as devotees of Krishna, as Vaishnavas. Srila Prabhupada said it's our dog collar. It reminds us as well to behave like Vaishnavas, and it also increases other people's consciousness of us as Vaishnavas, and therefore their consciousness of Krishna by seeing the tulsi beads. Tulsi is very purificatory on us, and also at the time of death, because Yamaraj doesn't approach anyone who wears tulsi beads. So the tulsi beads are very much a part of anyone who's following the Vaishnava tradition. It's generally required that one is also following the regulatory rules of the Vaishnava traditions, but there are also places in scripture where Krishna says that anyone can wear tulsi beads as well. So whereas it's an absolute necessity for all Vaishnavas, others may wear it. That's my understanding from reading those references. And then as far as chanting on tulsi beads, so this is also not absolutely necessary, but it's described that different japa beads or different chanting beads have different effects on the person who's chanting. So whereas neem, for example, can give one good health, I've read, we have others like lotus seeds and crystal beads that also have various properties. But tulsi, of course, being exclusively being Bhakti Devi, being exclusively for Krishna, by chanting on tulsi beads, we actually develop love for Krishna. So this is the advantage of chanting. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. So any other questions or comments or anything else that needs to be clarified? If not, we will.
Thank you very much for wonderful class,
Thank you for the service.
About tulsi beads, I have a question also. If one devotee lost or his tulsi beads are broken, what he can do?
So generally, as long as one has found all the beads, because there must be 108, they can be restrung. If the person has access to anyone who can restring it, then that's okay. There's no prohibition on them using the beads again, as long as they still have the 108 beads and the head bead. That's the important thing. The count must be perfect. The count of 108 Mahamantras. So restringing is perfectly fine.
But if he take another from the shop, must give these beads to his Diksha Guru to chant on them.
Sometimes devotees do that. It's not absolutely necessary, but a lot of devotees prefer if the guru can chant again, so the person can find out from the spiritual master if it's necessary. Otherwise, they don't actually have to have that every set of beads they have is chanted by the spiritual master. But if spiritual master is happy to do it, then it's okay. So they should ask the guru if it's necessary and if he could do it for them.
Thank you very much, dear Mataji. Dandava Pranam. Hari
Thank
Bol.
you, Akshay.
Very
Hare Krishna.
wonderful class. Thank you.
Thank you. That's always. Is there any other questions or comments?
I got one more question. Sorry for that.
Sure.
About the Tulsi plant, there's different types of Tulsi plants. I heard there's a Krishna and there's a Rama. And, is there a difference between the two if we worship them? And also, how does worshiping the Tulsi help us in our devotion, or what sort of practice should we have towards Tulsi plant? Thank you, Maharaj.
So, okay, it's a big topic actually, about Tulsi Devi in terms of like the practice of worshiping her. But generally, they are described to be two Tulsis. The Ram Tulsi is generally of a greenish color. We know that Ram is greenish in color, and Krishna Tulsi is dark purple. Although I think with seasonal variations, we're noticing Tulsi Devi of the Krishna type is not as dark as she used to be. But basically, the seeds of Krishna Tulsi that we have. So even if our color is different, it's actually Krishna Tulsi was worshipped in our devotional practices. Ram Tulsi is, although in the same species, it's not the same exactly as Krishna. And this is why they're actually botanical names, I think, are different as well. Tulsi, whom we worship, is Osman Sanctum. Sanctum, of course, meaning how sacred she is. So by worshipping Tulsi Devi, we develop love for Krishna, basically, to summarize why we worship her, because she is actually the expansion of Bhakti Devi. And of course, we know Bhakti Devi's expansion of Radharani. Specifically for the purpose of helping us develop love for Krishna. And we are always guided to approach the devotees of Krishna for this because they're so merciful. Tulsi Devi is extremely merciful because she comes in the form of a plant, so we can actually directly approach her. We may not be able to directly approach the deity in the temple, we may not be able to directly worship the deity at home, but we can always worship Tulsi Devi with a little bit of water, sincere prayers, and we know that there's that wonderful prayer that we recite when we're going around her, called the circumambulation, that describes that by each step that we sincerely take in that circumambulation, we are destroying all our sins. So this is the mercy of Tulsi Devi. She destroys our sins. She gives us pure love for Krishna. She gives us a wonderful association. We can maintain her with very simple worship like that, and we can of course offer her leaves and her manjaris to Krishna. It's his favorite thing, and therefore it's prescribed that Krishna will not partake of any food offering, bhoga offering that we make if Tulsi is not present. We can even use the Tulsi sticks if we don't have the leaves in that offering. So there's so many ways that she makes it possible for us to serve her and serve Krishna through her, so that we can get his mercy more effectively. And this is why we're advised to worship her. And there's different guidelines. There's booklets that have been made up as well. But simply we take care of her. We plant her. It's prescribed that there's 7 ways that we get the mercy of Tulsi Devi: by planting her, by watering her, by offering the leaves to Krishna, and so on. And so there's procedures for how to do that. Simply keep her and just water her and offer her leaves to Krishna and respect her, of course, that's good enough. Was there any other part to your question that I didn't answer?
Very much, you answered it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare
But
Krishna.
sorry for the diversion in the topic. I was just
No, no.
noticing I was
fine.
noticing your Tulsi bead, so I was thinking about the question after. Yeah. Thank you, Maji. Hare
That's fine.
Krishna.
No problem. Hare Krishna. Yeah, so look, there's a lot more detail that one could possibly give on that answer. We can put that up on our group as well. There's many nice resources about Devi that could possibly go also more into the differences between Ram and Krishna, why we worship Krishna. But we also know that these are the standards that Srila Prabhupada gave us, so this is what we try and follow. Okay, so do we still have time for short kirtan, Prabhu, or are we?
Yes, Maji. I was going to check Raja Shikhar Das Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, are you there? Welcome. Any comments or questions from your side, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Mataji.
Krishna, Guru.
No, I'll reserve any questions. Otherwise, we're going to be going very late. Hare Bol.
No, it's no problem, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we will sing the very wonderful but short bhajan, which is good for our time purposes today, Jai Radha Madhava, to increase our consciousness of the divine couple in Sri Vrindavan Dham. This is the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's given us Sri Vrindavan Dham and all the relationships within it, so we can meditate on that through this bhajan today. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajanandana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajanandana Jaya Jamuna Tiravanamchari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanamchari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. So the translation is, Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Braja and the holder of the great hill named Govardhan. He is the beloved son of Mother Yashoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Raja, and he wanders in the forests along the banks of the river Yamuna. Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Hari ki jai, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. So again, thank you all so much for your attention, joining us this evening. Apologies that we went over a little bit. But please join us next week when we continue the third and the final part of this wonderful chapter, chapter 17, describing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's wonderful pastimes. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.